Hi, and welcome to Parenting Today for Tomorrow podcast. My name is Josh Canarum. I'm one of the pastors here at Valleydale Church, and we are so excited that you've joined us on this journey through parenting. Our goal is simply this, to help you navigate the craziness that it is raising a child in this world. Our mission here at Valleydale is simple. We are generations helping our busy community know Christ and live for Him. And that's what we want to do. We want to help you raise a generation that knows Christ and lives for Him every day. Along the way, if you have any questions, we would love for you to send those on to parenting@valleydale.org. We would love as a staff or as pastors to answer those questions. Also, in a future episode of the podcast, we'll be dealing with those big issues that you have in mind. Thank you for listening, and God bless. Hey, welcome back to Parenting Today for Tomorrow podcast. So my name is Josh Canarum. I'm your host, and we're excited today. We're entering into the world of technology. So for our next two episodes, we're going to be talking about what is it that we're supposed to do with all of the technology that has filtered into our home, and how do we parent through that, and particularly parent with wisdom. Right. And we're going to dig into that. Technology is just one of those things that is all around us, and we've got to be wise if we're going to use that. I'm joined here by Chuck McCammon. He is our children's pastor here at Valleydale, and we shared some wisdom on boundaries in the past episode, and we're going to talk about boundaries probably in the next episode when it comes to technology. But today, we're just going to get a good overview and really just try to pursue this idea of awareness, because the first step in parenting with wisdom on technology is awareness. And so let me just ask you, How would you estimate how many devices are in your home right now?
Wow, that's a good question. Probably a dozen.
Yeah, I would think that was a low estimate. Some of them are dumber than others, but there's a lot of devices in my home, and people seem to be on them a lot in my home. I don't know about in yours. They have a lot of pull.
Get a lot of usage.
Yeah, they do. In fact, so Common Sense Media is a great resource for parents who are trying to figure out good content. Sure. But they also do some studies. There's a new one that actually just came out very recently that talks about how much time kids spend on screens. And I think it was something about, if you are a preteen, it's about 5 hours a day, and a teenager is upward about 7 hours a day. And that doesn't include homework time. So they're being used. It's present. It's in our homes. It's all over. Sometimes it's required for school. We had to buy a Chromebook for classes because that's what we had to do.
Well, that's when my kids got phones, because they kept having to pull them out in school.
Yeah. So sometimes it's just it's a necessary part of life. So there's a couple things I think are really helpful for us to establish, though. And when we begin to deal with technology, we can't approach it with fear. No, because it doesn't matter if we do or not; it's still there. But also, it's unavoidable. Technology to me is unavoidable. I think a lot of parents are so nervous when it comes to technology because all they hear about, and to their credit, it's a lot of what we hear about, is how the technology can be used for evil. Right. I make jokes about certain apps that are for evil, and kind of believe it sometimes with our students. But I do think that as parents, we tend to skew towards the negative side of technology, and we think, oh, this is ruining my children, or it's killing their attention span, or it's providing them opportunities to see things they shouldn't see. But we can't operate out of fear because it's unavoidable. Also, we talked earlier, it is neutral. Technology is a neutral thing. In fact, technology has always been around, and we've always had to adapt to it. Mm-hmm. When cars became a thing and teenagers started driving, parents had to figure that out. And here we are. Now we're trying to figure out a whole new level.
Behind us is a campfire.
Yeah.
At one point, that was a new technology.
That's right.
And parents had to teach their kids
and they taught
how not to burn themselves in the fire.
And how to burn the perfect marshmallow, not to burn it, but to brown it. That's something we're still working on in my home. We're almost there. Had a bonfire last week with the students. Just a lot of fire.
But as it goes back to boundaries, I know we're going to talk about that next. And part of teaching your kids boundaries relates to tech as well. How do I navigate tech in a safe and healthy way?
That's exactly right.
And so that's what we're trying to do rather than be fear-based.
And that's the thing. It is manageable. I do believe that technology is manageable, but you do have to create those boundaries, and we're going to dig into that.
And if you limit it based on fear, guess what? Their friends have it,
Oh, man, yeah.
And so they're going to be with their friends apart from your watchful eye, and so they're going to be on that tech regardless.
That's
so
right.
they need to know how to navigate it when you're not around.
And I think that is the key thing. If we could take away anything, it is how do we help our children, not how the parents navigate,
Right.
how do we inform our children in navigating the technology? Because like you said, you can put all the boundaries up in the world, they're still going to encounter it.
They will find
It's
it.
going to be on the bus, it's going to be in the classroom, it's going to be at the overnight retreat. It's going to be anywhere you go, it's going to be out there, and you just have to know what to do with it when the time comes. The other thing we can't use, though, is ignorance. And this is something I'm always kind of shocked by. In that same study I was talking about, it said that only 25% of parents monitor what their kids do online as teenagers. That is kind of wild to me. Now, I don't mean monitor like stand over them while they're using their phone, but they don't even monitor their usage time, the apps they have, the content filters they have. They don't. Only 25% of parents actually are invested in that way. Well, that's a scary thing because there are some things out there that are not very wise to use. Your kids don't always know what is appropriate and what's not. It's just one of those things that you got to be invested in.
Well, when you and I grew up, your parents knew everybody you knew.
That's right.
For a large degree. And so they were able to monitor relationships and connections and who our friends were and who was influencing us. It just expands our world. It expands who's influencing us. And unfortunately, for the most part, if they're in social media, it's hidden. And so we have to do the digging.
Yeah, that's, again, part of that awareness. I did learn that the typical student has 5 fake accounts that the parents probably don't know about.
Right.
That's just your typical average online student. Not that they're doing anything wrong with those things, but that they have them, and that's good awareness. I do think that technology, we can't be ignorant, partly because I know we just talked about not being fearful of it, but we do need to be responsible with it. And because it can be dangerous. It can open up pathways for kids to see things they shouldn't see at that age, conversations with people they shouldn't be having conversations with. Right. So it can be dangerous. It also has to be limited. The expectation that your child would know where the limits are is a crazy expectation. No. Your child doesn't know, and advertising and just the whole popular image of things is basically online all the time. Like, you're succeeding in life if you are always on these apps, if you're always active on these social media sites, if you're always doing that. And that's for older kids, but even younger kids. If you give a child a tablet full of shows and things to do and expect them to figure out when they need to stop, it's just not going to happen.
Right. And when their peers are talking about the things that they're seeing and experiencing and watching, they want to watch it too.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Their peers may not have the same supervision or same standards as you.
Yeah, and that's right. Well, and that's a huge part of all boundaries and all parenting, but particularly when it comes to technology, because not everybody shares your values.
Right.
And I think we know that, but it has implications for parenting. Sure. Because when you send someone over to someone else's house, they may not share your sensibilities.
And sometimes people that you think do, don't.
No, you cannot know. Unless you ask, and that might be an awkward conversation.
And maybe you should assume they don't until you learn that they do.
And that's a great point. Yeah, I can say that when I was a kid, I knew which movies to tell my friend to rent so I could watch them at his house, because I was never going to get to watch them at my house. And it worked out most of the time. Every now and then I mentioned seeing it, and that was a real problem. That's exactly right. And again, it goes. We're helping our children navigate. We're navigating these things, and it's a process. It's not something that's as easy as we think it is. I like to talk to parents about wisdom with technology. I think wisdom is an important word when it comes to technology. And the first thing about wisdom is just knowledge. We talked about awareness. Now, one of the big things about awareness is that we do need to know what our kids are using. So really practically, we need to know how much time they're on these devices. The same way you need to know how much time they're outside, how much time they're eating, how much time they're sleeping. If you know those things, we're not really to the point where we monitor that very well. And so we need to know not only what they're doing and how much they're doing, but how they're being influenced by it. Right. There are times when I know that my children are being negatively influenced, not in a sinful way, but in a frustration way, when they're playing games against their friends and they're getting frustrated, and then suddenly they're in a bad mood.
Right.
And I just remind them that is an optional exercise.
Sure.
You do not need to do that. You're just making yourself frustrated.
Well, and some of the peer interaction that isn't always positive.
Yeah.
You used to be able to. It was left at school at the end of the day.
That's right.
And you come home and it's a safe place, and life goes on. But now those friends are ever present.
Oh, it doesn't stop.
It never stops. And so there's got to be a time to kind of put that away.
That's right.
And get away from that influence.
Yeah, and to understand the effects it's having. And that takes some investment and awareness for sure.
Sure it does.
You have to ask those questions. Again, how often they're using it, what devices they have. I had a conversation a couple years ago with a parent who said, hey, my child doesn't have an iPhone. They have an iPod Touch so that they're safe. And I hated to break it to them, but they're Wi-Fi enabled with browsers and everything. I mean, they're basically a phone if you have Wi-Fi. And they had no idea, and had to have some really big conversations with their child about usage and all of those things.
Sure.
So what devices are out there? And then, for the parents of older kids, the social media impact, I think, is an incredibly interesting thing. There are so many studies on how social media, for younger kids, especially middle school age kids, how it is really hard for them to navigate this. Mm-hmm. It is creating an environment in a world that can be kind of tricky for them to understand. That they love the immediate feedback. They love knowing that people like the things they like. But they're also often crushed by knowing that they're not part of things. That,
sure.
I have a lot of our students that they get pretty upset because they see a picture of every friend they have at a party, but they weren't invited. And now, normally they would never have known, maybe until they went back to school. Now all weekend they know they have to deal with it, no conversations to have, and it's just really hard. But studies continue to show that especially younger kids who get it maybe even before they're supposed to have it, actually have some mental health issues because they feel a little less worthy. They have a lot more insecurities.
Sure.
And as a student pastor, we try to really think through that and what is the impact that this media is having on them.
Well, another impact it's having is shortened attention spans.
Sure.
When you want your child to be able to focus in school or focus on a Sunday in church or any other time, they've got to devote some time and energy and thought.
Yeah.
And focus to one thing. Everything in social media is bite-sized and
That's
fast,
right.
and it does have an impact.
That's right. And it's even adults, we love it. We have great interaction, and so there's some positive things, and that's one of the things I really struggle. Every time I talk to parents about technology, I feel like I'm making everybody sad. Like it is so depressing. Everybody leaves my little seminars, and they just seem defeated, and I hate that. But sometimes that is how we respond to realities. And sometimes reality is a little darker than we wanted to believe. And our kids are being forced to face a world that simply exposes them to things at a much earlier age than they've ever been exposed
Correct.
before. And so I don't want people to be sad, and I definitely already said I don't want them to be scared. There are some really positive parts of technology, too. I love that we have resources out there. When I have to do homework with my children, I just go straight to YouTube and I figure out math problems and I figure out all this stuff. And when I give them resources, we're learning piano with apps. So there's some really positive things. So with knowledge, we also need to understand that we need to be knowledgeable about the positive sides and the good things that technology can bring. The informational shows that are out there, the things that even our youngest kids can already start learning. We watched a show called High Five, which is very hard to find. I think you have to find the DVDs or some weird online thing. But it was really fundamental to our kids learning how to read and how to memorize things and learn. They still know a lot of the planets and things because of the show. So technology is not all bad, and there's some great things, but we have to know where to find it.
And it's like any other area of your kid's life. When my oldest was coming up, he was interested in karate.
Yeah.
I never had an interest in karate, but all of a sudden, because I have a child who does, now I am.
Yeah.
And so I began to learn a little bit more about karate, be invested in karate.
Yeah.
Wasn't my interest, but it was interesting to him, and I needed to be interested as well.
Yeah.
Same principle with the technology. I need to know and be interested in what my kids are interested in
That's
that
a great
aspect.
point. Yeah. Listen, there is no excuse. Like we did not. So I didn't grow up with it. I got my first computer when I went to college. I didn't grow up in the internet age. We had internet. We had internet enough to go. I would click on a website, go downstairs, make a snack, get a drink, come back up, and it was almost loaded. That was how fast the internet worked in my house.
Right.
Now, I didn't grow up in it, but listen, that's no excuse. I've got to know. We really, as parents, need to be technology experts, and we have to work at that because we have to know what's going on in the lives of our kids and the tools they're using, and sometimes that can be really intimidating, but it's just important because we're allowing our kids to journey into areas that are unknown in a lot of ways, and they don't know how to handle it. And if we don't know what they're doing, we're not going to be able to guide them and walk with them. And so we've got to kind of take that plunge. And just because you're not techie or because you don't understand technology, at this point, it's really not an option. As a parent, you have signed on to become a technology expert because that's the reality that we live in. Right. It's a technological world. And so I think that can be really helpful.
Well, and the less savvy tech person can do what you've done with math.
Yeah.
Go on YouTube.
Yeah.
And
nobody would ever claim that I am savvy with math. That is for sure.
But you can learn all about things.
But you can, you can figure it out really fast. And that's a great point. Like just say, hey, child of mine, how do I get on YouTube? Where is the search bar? Let's just start. Let's learn about technology. Right. And you can do it from other parents. There are a lot of resources you can learn about these things. But again, knowledge is that first step. Knowledge is the first key. You have to understand if you're not trying to learn of these things, if you're not trying to stay on top of it, then you're going to fall behind, and your child, again, is just kind of wandering into a land by themselves. We would never let them do that in real life. But for some reason, we're still not sold that it's necessary in the digital life, and it 100% truly is.
Absolutely is.
A couple resources I would recommend for that. Common Sense Media is a great website. We just talked about that earlier. That can give you some really good understanding of things. A couple other resources that I like to recommend. There are some focus on the family resources. You can go there and find some reviews for content because we haven't even gotten into content and how to understand discernment on what kids are watching. Sure. That's a whole nother thing of technology because not all of that shares our values. You'll be shocked to learn that some media is not Christian values. But those kind of websites.
Taylor Swift's not Christian, is what?
Not all the time. Some of those things don't maybe lead you to the values that you're trying to create in your child. Yeah. So you just got to be careful with that. But again, pursue those resources. Find those resources. You can find some of those resources even here posted with the podcast, and we'll be sure to do that. But this has been a fantastic conversation. We're going to continue the conversation in the next episode as we talk a little bit about more the practicalities of setting those technological boundaries, and this is the scary part, of modeling those boundaries. Oh, that's the worst because I realize I am the chief of sinners a lot of times when it comes to technology and boundaries, but we're going to do it. And so that's going to be in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have some questions, this is a topic that always has a ton of questions. If you have some questions on this, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at parenting@valleydale.org, and we will respond to those in a later episode where we're going to cover questions that have kind of covered the entire series of this podcast so that we might be able to communicate and dialogue a little bit better with you. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. We hope you found this podcast encouraging and helpful as you raise your child. If you have any questions, send those on to parenting@valleydale.org. We'll see you next time.